My name is Eliza Moreland, 34 years old. 6 years earlier, our first office was the far corner of my garage where the paint smell never quite died and the concrete breathed cold through the spring. Maris Ellery and I taped a whiteboard to a stud and called it governance. We ate noodles from paper cups and wrote our first contract on a folding table we'd rescued from the curb. "We don't forget where we came from," Maris would say, tapping the whiteboard, her bracelets chiming like a promise. 50-50, always. By year 3, Bridgeway Labs wasn't a rumor anymore. We were 47 people, a row of coffee-stained badges on lanyards, and an on-call Slack channel that never slept. North Sound Health signed a pilot, then a system-wide renewal. The day venture capitalists started circling, Maris bought us a cake shaped like a bridge. "To scale," she joked, and everyone laughed like we weren't terrified of the weight. The baby shower Maris insisted on was too much, like everything she orchestrated. A balloon arch that scraped the acoustic tiles, catered cupcakes with edible gold flecks. She gave a speech that made the interns cry, how a real company bends to life, not the other way around. I stood there with a paper plate and a strawberry I couldn't keep down, and when I hugged her, her perfume pressed into my collarbone, sharp, green, expensive. Her smile didn't quite touch her eyes, and I told myself it was the lighting. Lark arrived 3 weeks early, small and loud and absolutely certain. Complications meant 12 weeks off instead of 8. I stitched myself back together in a hospital room that sounded like rain, IV pumps sighing, hallway wheels hushing by. My husband Evan put a tiny knit hat on Lark's head and texted family. Maris texted too, every day at odd hours. "Focus on healing. Everything's handled." Little heart emoji, confetti, a gif of a baby fist pumping like a CEO. I'd installed recording software on our conference room system months earlier, after a client's false claim forced us to reconstruct a meeting from memory. Documentation became religion after that. Automatic, tamper-proof, time-stamped. It wasn't about suspicion, it was about having a spine when memory turned to fog. At 2 a.m., my assistant Piper called. Her voice had a paper-thin quiver. "There's an emergency board meeting tomorrow morning," she whispered. "You weren't notified." My stomach snapped cold. "Agenda? I can't see it. The invite is private." A rustle, a breath. "Eliza, I'm sorry. I thought—" She cut herself off. "Do you want me to—" "No." Lark stirred on my chest, heavy as a heartbeat. "I've got it." When we hung up, the room felt like a theater after the audience was gone. Lights low, sets watching. I opened the archive on my laptop, a little black rectangle that had seen me through demo days and 3 a.m., build breaks. The file names were dry as clerk stamps. Board, special session, May 12th. I put one earbud in and pressed play. The conference room came alive in tinny sound and too bright confidence. Maris's voice was the first to cut through, clean, unshakable. "We need decisive leadership while Eliza is on leave," she said, like she was discussing procurement schedules and not my life. "There are optics to consider. Investors need stability." Optics? That was Devin, our CFO. Careful, precise. "She just had a baby, Maris." Maris exhaled. The microphone caught it like a hiss. "Postpartum is a medical reality, Devin, and we have to be honest about the risks. The partnership agreement allows for temporary restructuring in the event of incapacitation." Incapacitation? Someone chuckled, uncomfortable. Chairs creaked. That's a strong word. Maris didn't blink, at least not in my ear. Strong is what the company needs. The recording carried the tiny theater of power. Someone stirring coffee, the little tap of a pen, the wet catch when the glass door sealed. I listened to Maris redefine care as caution, absence as instability. The motion she proposed wasn't a coup, not on paper. It was responsible continuity planning. My name became a variable to be managed, a risk to be mitigated, a line item to be moved. In another meeting 2 days later, she was more surgical. "I've already spoken to Bramwell Partners," she told them, casual as weather. "They're excited about me stepping into CEO responsibilities, continuity of vision, etc. If we adjust the cap table now, we'll calm the waters before next quarter's review." Adjust the cap table. I mouthed the phrase and tasted copper. Lark sighed against me, all warm milk and unfought battles. Outside the window, a sodium lamp made the wet parking lot glow like a stage floor. I kept listening. 6 meetings in 10 days. Investors drifted in like weather fronts, their careful voices laced with curiosity. How would the company ensure stability? Could Maris provide a more singular direction? A lawyer's name appeared, Teague Law, on retainer to interpret the partnership's emergency clauses. Each time Maris described me, she shaved a little more off the edge of who I was. She's brilliant, she'd say, but she's having a hard postpartum. We have to do what's best for the company. Best for the company. The phrase kept looping, a lullaby for knives. On a file-dated board, Finance Review, May 20th, I heard a different music, numbers, line items. Operating account variance? Devin asked. Nominal, said a junior controller, too quickly. Paper shifted. Someone coughed. Devin asked for specifics. Answers came spongy. The amounts were small, microscopic in context, rounded withdrawals tucked into vendor clusters, the kind you wouldn't notice unless you were already suspicious. I paused the recording, staring at a blinking cursor like it might blink back. Years ago, when it was just me and Maris, she'd joke about tipping the jar, stealing an hour back from a day that had stolen it first. Now there were fingerprints on funds that should have been clean, not massive heists, not headlines, just a disciplined hum of small takings, the kind that add up only if you're the one reconciling at 2 a.m. I pressed play again. In a clip labeled, Executive Session, Ellery Proposal, Maris's voice dropped the varnish. We restructure now, she said. We don't wait for her to come back and make this harder than it has to be. Have you told her? Devin asked. Of course. The lie didn't even flinch. By 5 a.m., the window was a gray square, and the monitor reflected a version of my face that looked too old for the hospital bracelet on my wrist. Lark slept through the last clip, a meeting where Teague Law's associate spoke in dry, buffered phrases about fiduciary duty and temporary proxy mechanisms, while Maris said yes in a tone that meant finally. I didn't cry. It was stranger than that, like something heavy inside me clicked into its socket. I had loved Maris like a sister you pick on purpose. I had built a bridge with her and marched clients across it like a parade. She knew my banking details from a line of credit application. She knew where my spare house key was taped. She knew how my fear sounded when I pretended not to be afraid. I opened a fresh document and began to type. Dates, times, file names, summaries in tight legal verbs, asserts, proposes, implies, directs. Because if this was going to be a war, it would be fought in the language court's respect. The pump on Lark's bassinet sighed. A nurse patted in to check vitals and gave me a look I recognized. You should sleep, but didn't say it out loud. When the door closed, I scrolled to the first recording and inserted a screenshot. Exhibit A. Then the next, Exhibit B. The embezzlement was still a suspicion, but the pattern felt like a drumbeat I could prove if I learned the rhythm. At 6:11 a.m., a calendar alert vibrated my phone. Board, emergency session, 8:20 a.m. I wasn't on it, but I was looking straight at it. I saved the document 3 different ways, emailed it to a clean account, and watched the tiny progress bar crawl forward like an oath. Then I opened a new email and typed Camille Hart, inquiry in the subject line. She was the attorney a rival founder had once called a scalpel with legs. I pasted a single paragraph. I have recordings, timestamps, and a probable embezzlement pattern. I'm on maternity leave, and my co-founder is moving to restructure the cap table without notice. I need to move fast, but clean. Before I could hit send, a new message slid into my inbox. No subject, from a burner-looking address. Don't make this messy. Let me handle it. M. For a moment, the room felt weightless, like an elevator catching itself. I hit send anyway. When Lark woke, the sky was full morning. I tucked her into the crook of my arm and pressed play on one last file I hadn't noticed before. Executive session. Maris only. Flagged. The artifacting in the audio made her voice sound further away, almost kind. We do this now, she said, to someone I couldn't hear. By the time she's back, there won't be anything left to fight over. I stared at the ceiling tile with the hairline crack that looked like a river splitting, and decided I would become Flood. The first week home tasted like metal and microwave oatmeal. Nights were a braid of Lark's soft animal sounds and the chime of incoming emails. I learned to scroll with one thumb while the other steadied her bottle, to pause a recording exactly at the syllable where a lie began. The archive became a second nursery monitor, always on, always catching the faintest shift in breathing. Camille Hart called within an hour of my email. "Talk to me," she said, voice like clean glass. I gave her the spine of it. Recordings, timestamps, the proxy clause Maris kept massaging like a knot. The skimming I could feel but couldn't prove yet. "Good," Camille said. "You're not going to confront. You're going to document. You're going to be boring and relentless. Send me the files and a list of anyone who's heard the word incapacitated attached to your name." "Half the board," I said, and the word half scraped. "We'll need a forensic accountant," she added. "Someone who can read through the fog. I have a name." "Make the call." After we hung up, Piper texted, "You okay?" It was the kind of question that expected a lie back. I typed yes and deleted it. Then wrote thanks for the heads up and deleted that too, finally sending working on it because it carried no weight either way. I went back to the files. In vendor reconciliation, April. Small debits hid inside clusters of legitimate payments. $482.13 here. $317.89 there. The labels were just boring enough to pass. Ancillary integration, QA overflow, courier differential. A busy controller would yawn and move on. A co-founder on maternity leave would never see them. At 3:19 a.m., Lark appeared at the edge of a dream and wailed like a siren. I rocked her against the glow of the laptop until the sound softened. The room smelled like milk and the ghost of antiseptic. Outside, streetlights held their breath. Another file, Investor Touchbase, May 18th. "You'll have me as your single point of contact," Maris said, the charm warm and humid. "No more two-founder paralysis. It'll be faster." "And Eliza?" a man asked. "Bramwell Partners, probably." You could hear the cufflinks. "She's brilliant," Maris replied, then made a small sound like she was choosing which coat to wear. "She's not in a place to lead right now." "How not in a place?" "Postpartum. It's unpredictable." A paper slide. "I'm doing what's best for the company." Best for the company had graduated from lullaby to incantation. I paused and wrote the sentence down, a chalk mark on the wall. The pattern mattered more than any single offense. In court, patterns are how you teach strangers to infer intent. By the time the sun flattened itself over the ridge of the neighbor's roof, I had a stack, Exhibit A through Q. Camille's shared folder filled with the patience of wet cement setting. The forensic accountant, a quiet woman named Isla, sent a short note. Received. Start with April through YTD. Also need bank-level exports, not PDFs, raw. I requested access from Devin. 10 minutes later, he called me, voice sanded down to the grain. "You realize if I pull raw for you, it leaves a trail." "I want a trail," I said. "I'm counting on the trail." A silence. "She said you approved a continuity plan." She lied. He exhaled, and in it, I heard the sound a man makes when he recognizes the choice in front of him. "I'll send the files to Isla directly," he said. "Separate lane. On paper, it's part of the Q2 audit prep." "Devin," I know, he cut in very soft. I should have said something sooner. "You're saying it now." The second week, Camille began carving a plan. "We tipped the investors before they're spooked beyond retrieval," she said on a Zoom, where I kept my camera off because Lark had spit up on the good robe. Selective transparency. You don't come off as hysterical, you come off as inevitable. Meanwhile, we prep a walk-in, civil before criminal. We'll invite federal when the numbers sing. "Walk-in?" I asked, though I knew, in the part of my mind that had already bought shoes for it. "You return on your scheduled day," she said. "With Isla. With letters. With 2 agents who enjoy fluorescent lighting." I pictured the conference room, the glass walls, the potted plant Maris watered only when people were watching, the acoustic panel with a thumbprint in the corner that I'd stopped seeing years ago. I imagined walking into it not as a supplicant or a conciliator, but as a fact. The days braided into each other. Lark's cheeks rounded. The stitches stopped tugging. Isla's emails became music only I could dance to. Variance threads consolidate into 2 shadow accounts. Pattern consistent with internal. Off-book returns to personal wallet. Amounts consistently under internal thresholds. She attached charts with rain lines of numbers falling and pooling where they shouldn't. The totals weren't flashy, not television huge, but over 2 years, they made a shape that could no longer be called an accident. Camille's paralegal organized the exhibits like a jeweler laying out stones. "We're not going to miss," Camille said when we reviewed the set the night before my return. "We're going to hand them a choice." "What if they choose wrong?" I asked. "Then you'll have chosen right." Evan took the morning off to drive me in, the car suddenly feeling too small for the size of what was about to happen. Lark slept in the back, impervious to other people's tides. I wore black because I didn't trust myself not to spill coffee and because it made me look like someone with a plan she believed in. "You ready?" Evan asked, his hand a warm, anchored thing on my knee. "I'm not sure ready is a thing," I said, but yes. Camille met us in this parking garage with Isla and 2 investigators who smelled faintly of old file folders and peppermint gum. "Agents Red and Yamada," Camille said. Their nods were professional, the kind you give to people you expect to be telling the truth. We rode the elevator in a silence that had a shape. When the doors opened, Piper was at her desk, eyes wide, fingers white around a pen. She stood as if the air had ordered her to. "Good morning," she said to me like a prayer. "Morning," I said, and kept moving. The conference room was already a fishbowl of faces when we arrived. Maris turned, relief ready on her mouth, like she was about to call me sweetheart. Then she saw Camille, then the badges, then Isla's neat folders. Her face went still. Something behind her eyes shut a door. "What's happening?" she asked, and her voice did not invite answers. "You wanted changes," I said, laying a packet in the center of the table. "Here they are." Camille took over then, efficient as an incision. "We have documentation of attempted restructuring in violation of the partnership agreement, evidence of misrepresentation to investors, and preliminary forensic findings of embezzlement over 24 months. Federal investigators are here to collect relevant records. You will not delete, alter, or remove any data from corporate systems while this review is underway." Maris laughed in a short, bright sound that didn't belong to the room. "This is postpartum theater," she said, and her eyes flicked to the board, seeking solidarity. "She's overreacting." Agent Red unholstered a clipboard like a weapon. "We'll need access to your workstation, Ms. Ellery." "Absolutely not," she said, but Devin was already walking to it, and the room shifted allegiance one shoe squeak at a time. Through the glass, employees watched boxes fill with files that used to be future. Piper appeared at my elbow and set down a bottle of water I didn't remember asking for. "Do you need anything?" she whispered. "This is everything," I said, and meant it. The vote happened after 3 hours of uncomfortable silence, legal phrases stacked like sandbags. It was clean because it had to be. Mess would have let everyone pretend they didn't see what they'd seen. When it was done, the board chair cleared his throat and said words I had once imagined hearing under confetti, not under fluorescent lights. "Eliza, effective immediately, you are CEO." Across the table, Maris had gone gray at the edges. She wasn't crying. I don't think she allowed herself that. She kept her hands flat on the tempered glass as if pressing hard enough could turn it back into sand. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Unknown number. A text with no punctuation. "Check your personal accounts, all of them." A second buzz, another message. "Now." For a beat, I didn't move. The ringed water bottle sweated onto the table, a clear circle marking where something had been. Camille was still talking to the board about chain of custody when I slid my phone below the table edge and opened my banking app. The number in my savings account made no sense to my brain, the way a typo can rearrange a sentence into nonsense. $0. A hole. I checked the brokerage next. Liquidated. The college fund I'd started for Lark the day after her birth certificate arrived. Empty, as if a thief had cut the bottom out and let the future pour through. My chest felt suddenly airless, like I'd surfaced too fast. I scrolled to recent activity, and there it was. Wires authorized during the days I'd been in the hospital. Initials beside the signatures that looked like mine if you'd only ever seen my name on a billboard. The app kept trying to be helpful. Was this you? And the bright friendliness made me want to drop the phone into the water bottle's sweating circle and watch it drown. I texted Evan, accounts drained. Dots appeared, disappeared, reappeared. "How?" he sent, and the word was an open mouth. Before I could answer, an email thunked into my inbox from Camille. "We have a problem. Investors just received a clip that appears to be you approving transfers and the restructuring. It's doctored, but it's good. Senator Ellery's firm is on the reply all. Call me now." Across the glass, Maris finally lifted her eyes to mine. If her look were a sentence, it would have had a period, not a question mark. The floor tilted. I gripped the edge of the table and smiled because I had forgotten how not to perform. I had walked in with the truth. She had walked in with a lie that looked easier to believe. I clicked on the doctored clip. My voice came out of my phone, clean, agreeable, the version of me that had never learned to say no. I authorized the transfers, the voice said, and the temporary restructuring. It's best for the company. Best for the company. Their lullaby, now sung in my mouth. The board chair's phone pinged, then another, notifications blooming like algae. I watched the room tip back toward maybe she's unstable, toward maybe this is mutual destruction. Lark's picture lit my lock screen, all cheeks and astonishment. I looked at her and at the woman who had once tapped a whiteboard and made a promise, and I realized the war wasn't over. It had just changed fonts. Camille, I said, standing into the new gravity, get the medical records, the timestamps on my surgery, every text from the hospital. We fight this in daylight. And then, because I couldn't help myself, I glanced at Maris and thought of the crack in the ceiling tile, the river splitting. Some floods take everything. Some reveal what was rotting underneath. Camille's office smelled like ozone and burnt coffee, the scent of war. I sat there in the same black suit I'd worn for the walk-in, Lark's pacifier clipped to my pocket because I hadn't realized it was there until too late. Camille didn't comment. She just pushed her hair behind one ear and started reading the latest investor statements like they were an autopsy report. 3 of them are out, she said flatly. Bramwell, Corseed, and Lysander Partners. They don't want their names anywhere near a co-founder dispute involving fraud allegations. Their phrase, not mine. I rubbed my temples. So the company I just saved is already dead. Not dead, Camille said, but on life support and in need of a miracle that looks good on camera. She tapped the tablet screen, turning it toward me. She beat you to the story, Eliza. Her father's firm leaked a counterclaim, alleging you fabricated the recordings to frame Maris while suffering postpartum psychosis. I laughed, but it came out wrong. Too sharp, too tired. Psychosis, that's creative. They attached a doctor's note you signed authorizing sedatives after the C-section. The implication, you were hallucinating or impaired. My stomach flipped. I remembered that form, the one I'd scrawled half asleep, begging the nurse to stop the pain. I was in surgery when some of those wire transfers happened, I said. There are hospital logs, incision notes, timestamps. They can't argue that. They can and they will, Camille replied. They're claiming you pre-signed the transfer authorizations before leave. That's why her forged versions line up perfectly with your signature on other forms. You were too trusting. The words stung because they were true. She knows my passwords, Camille. My social, my signature, everything. Camille leaned back, eyes narrowing. Then we need to make this public before they control the narrative. The courts will take months. The investors will vanish in weeks. You can win legally and still lose everything by reputation. I'm not giving them that. Then it's time to stop playing defense. I knew what she meant before she said it. Go public, I murmured. Controlled transparency, Camille said. You leak the truth before she leaks her version. Not in your voice, in someone else's. Someone credible, neutral, already hungry for the story. I thought about the business cards stuffed into my desk drawer. Journalists, analysts, recruiters. Then one name surfaced like a buoy. Nate Rios, I said slowly. Freelance tech reporter. Tried to interview me 2 years ago about women founders. I ghosted him. Then unghost him. We met the next morning in a quiet coffee shop 3 blocks from Bridgeway. I wore sunglasses and an expression I hoped read more confident than cornered. Nate looked exactly the same. Overgrown curls, notebook already open, curiosity barely disguised. Didn't expect to ever get this call, he said. Neither did I. You said you have a story? You could call it that. I slid a flash drive across the table, small enough to destroy a life. Audio files, meeting transcripts, bank statements, medical records. Everything's time-stamped and verified. I don't need spin, just the truth. Nate didn't touch the drive yet. You realize this could burn your company to the ground. It already is on fire, I said quietly. I just want the right people holding the matches. He studied me for a long moment. Why me? Because you care about stories that get women written out of their own success, and because you're not owned by anyone with a lobbyist father. That earned the faintest smile. Fair enough. He pocketed the drive. If this checks out, it'll go live tomorrow morning. Make it clean, I said. No hysteria, no victim narrative, just the receipts. That night, while Evan bathed Lark, I sat in the dark and listened to the baby monitor. The faint splash of water, his laugh when she kicked too hard, the sound of a world I couldn't afford to lose. My laptop screen glowed with open tabs, investor emails, federal case numbers, news drafts. A notification blinked. BridgewayLabs.com server access locked by admin. Maris had locked me out of my own system. Let her, I whispered to myself. She won't own what's coming. At 5:52 a.m., Nate texted a link. Live. Senator's daughter, accused of embezzlement and corporate fraud. Sources provide recordings. By 7 a.m., the world had exploded. My phone lit up like a switchboard. Investors backpedaling, journalists requesting comments, employees sending cautious thumbs-up emojis. The senator's office issued a statement by noon. Due to conflicts of interest, Ellery and Baines, LLP, will not represent Ms. Ellery in any ongoing matters. Translation: he'd thrown her under the bus. At 2:00 p.m., my phone rang. No caller ID. I already knew. You destroyed me, Maris said, voice ragged. No, I said evenly. You destroyed yourself. I just turned on the lights. I'll sue you for defamation. With what money? I asked. Your father dropped you, and I documented everything. Truth is a defense, remember? Silence. Then a sound I'd never heard from her before. A half sob, half laugh. We were supposed to be sisters. We were, I said softly, until you decided family was a liability. The line went dead. The next 3 months were a blur of depositions, filings, and headlines. Federal investigators corroborated the recordings and traced the siphoned funds to personal accounts under Maris's name. She pled guilty to embezzlement to avoid prison, agreeing to restitution and a permanent corporate ban. Camille called one evening with the final numbers. You'll get your money back, plus damages, she said. I looked at Lark asleep in her crib, her hand curled around a stuffed rabbit. And the company? Camille hesitated. The brand is toxic. Too many investors scared off. You can sell it for parts or let it die. Let it die, I said. Some things aren't worth resurrecting. The sale took 4 weeks. Bridgeway Labs went to a larger conglomerate for less than half its original valuation. After debts and legal fees, I walked away with enough to live for maybe 2 years if I was careful. On the morning the transfer closed, I stood outside the building one last time. The sign gleamed in the autumn sun. The logo Maris and I had drawn on a napkin now carved in steel. A security guard was swapping key cards as new owners arrived. Piper walked out behind me, clutching a cardboard box. You okay? She asked. I think so, I said. It's strange, losing something you built with your hands. You'll build again, she said, certain. I smiled. Yeah, maybe this time I'll build it right. 2 months later, the garage smelled like dust and second chances. I cleared the shelves, rolled in a folding desk, and taped a new whiteboard to the same wall where the first one had been. The marker squeaked as I wrote a single word. Lark line. Not a bridge anymore, a flight path. Piper joined first, then Devin, the only board member who'd looked ashamed when the lights came on. I asked him during his interview why he hadn't spoken up. Because I was a coward, he said. I knew it was wrong, and I did nothing. I won't make that mistake again. That was good enough for me. Larkline Systems grew slowly, quietly. We worked from my kitchen table between nap schedules and feedings. Clients trickled in, small contracts at first. Startups that couldn't afford the big firms, but wanted reliability. When North Sound Health called again, I almost didn't answer. The same hospital network that had dropped us during the scandal wanted to partner again, impressed by how I'd handled adversity with transparency. Ironic, I told Camille when I forwarded her the email. Poetic, she said. Take the meeting. By the end of the week, we'd signed a new contract. Modest, but symbolic. The same hospital that had watched us burn was now paying us to rebuild. That night, after putting Lark to bed, I sat at the same garage desk where it had all begun and let the quiet settle. The air hummed with crickets, distant traffic, and the faint smell of wet asphalt. Evan came out holding 2 mugs of tea. Feels different this time, he said. It is, I said. It's mine. I looked at the whiteboard where the word Larkline shone under fluorescent light, and for the first time in months, I let myself breathe. The bridge had collapsed. The phoenix was still just ash. But somewhere beneath it, the heartbeat of something new was starting to form. Steady, stubborn, alive. The first months of Larkline Systems were stitched together from naps, invoices, and the smell of reheated coffee. My world shrank to two sounds: the soft whir of the baby monitor and the quiet hum of my laptop. I coded with one hand and held Lark with the other, learning to type through exhaustion. Piper worked from my dining table, sorting contracts while her toddler played on the floor beside her. The company was tiny, improvised, and alive. I'd thought rebuilding would feel triumphant, cinematic. Instead, it was methodical. Every victory came wrapped in anxiety. A signed contract meant cash flow, yes, but it also meant risk. Every new hire felt like opening another door someone could someday slam in my face. I checked bank statements obsessively, 3 times a day at first, then twice, then once. Trust had become a muscle I didn't know how to use anymore. Devin handled the books. "Separate accounts," he said the first week, sliding papers across my kitchen counter. "Business stays business. You never mix again." "I learned that the hard way," I said. He nodded, eyes steady. "Then you won't forget." He was right, I didn't. Larkline's first real office was a subleased warehouse corner that smelled like sawdust and old paint. There was no reception desk, just folding tables and the stubborn optimism of people who believed this time would be different. I painted one wall white myself, just to feel like I owned something tangible. The clients came back slowly, some from pity, some from admiration. I didn't care why, only that they came. North Sound Health signed a 1-year pilot after a quiet dinner meeting. Their CIO, a careful woman named Corinne, met my eyes across the table. "You took a beating," she said simply. "Most people don't get up after that." I didn't have a choice, I told her. I had a baby and a mortgage. Corinne smiled. "That'll do it." When the contract ink dried, Piper cried. I didn't. I just exhaled, long and quiet, like I'd been holding my breath for a year. Evenings were the strangest part, the quiet that followed adrenaline. Evan would cook pasta while I balanced quarterly reports on the counter. Lark babbled from her high chair, smearing avocado across her cheeks like war paint. Sometimes I'd catch Evan watching me, that mix of pride and worry husbands get when they see you rebuilding yourself from rubble. "You look less angry these days," he said once. "I'm still angry," I replied. "Just focused." He nodded. "That's worse for whoever crosses you next." I laughed, but there was truth in it. By the end of year 1, we had 12 employees, a real logo, and a single rule pinned above my desk: trust with proof. I told every new hire the same thing during orientation. "Loyalty is valuable," I said. "Documentation is priceless." They laughed, thinking it was a joke. I didn't correct them. Camille stopped by occasionally, partly to check the company's legal health, partly because she didn't trust me not to overwork. She'd drop a stack of compliance forms on my desk and say, "Sign these before someone else decides to sign for you." Once, as we went through filings, she glanced at a photo of Maris and me that I'd never managed to throw away. It sat in a box near the bookshelf. 2 women in hoodies holding a coffee-stained prototype board, smiling like the world couldn't touch them. "You should toss that," Camille said. "I tried," I admitted, "twice. It keeps ending up back in the box." "Maybe it's a reminder." "Of what?" She shrugged. "How far you'll go to never be her." The call from North Sound came 6 months later. Their pilot results were in, a success. They wanted to expand the contract, double the scope. I held the phone to my ear, staring at Lark building towers from plastic blocks on the living room carpet. "That's great news," I said, forcing my voice to sound professional. "It is," Corinne said, "but I have to ask, will your company survive scaling that fast?" I smiled. "We'll survive anything." And we did. Barely. The next 6 months were a blur of growth and sleeplessness. Lark started walking between my client calls. Piper learned to rock her stroller with one foot while answering emails. Devin built dashboards that tracked every dollar in real time. Every so often, I'd catch myself thinking about Maris, wondering if she read the articles, if she knew I'd risen from the ashes of the company she tried to steal. Then I'd close the thought like a file I didn't need anymore. Some ghosts feed on attention. Year 2 began with sunlight streaming through glass windows, our first proper office, downtown Seattle, the kind with clean lines, frosted logos, and a coffee machine that didn't sputter. Piper hung a framed photo of our first garage whiteboard. "Proof," she said, tapping the frame. "Of what?" I almost asked, but I knew. Proof that we'd survived. Devin hosted a toast with cheap champagne and paper cups. "To new beginnings," he said. I raised my cup, to not making the same mistakes twice. Everyone cheered, clinking cardboard like glass. That night, after everyone left, I sat alone in the new office. The city glittered through the window. Cranes, lights, rain-smudged reflections. My reflection looked older, sharper. Not unkind, just aware. I scrolled through old voicemails and found one from Maris I'd never deleted. "Don't make this messy," she'd said. "Let me handle it." I hit delete, for real this time. 2 months later, Camille called again. "They're closing the investigation," she said. "Federal restitution finalized. Case closed." "Good." "She took a plea, Eliza. No jail time, but her professional license is gone. She's moving out of state." "Good," I repeated. Camille hesitated. "You sound disappointed." "I'm not," I said. "I just don't feel anything. Maybe that's what closure really is." Lark turned 2 that week. We threw a small party in the office. Employees, cake, too many balloons. Devin brought a stuffed elephant. Piper made cupcakes shaped like tiny computers. As Lark tried to blow out her candle, she sneezed instead, showering frosting across the table. Everyone laughed. "Symbolic," Piper said, "blowing away bad luck." I smiled. "Let's hope so." Later that night, after everyone had gone, I found myself staring at the whiteboard again, the same words still written at the top. Trust with proof. For the first time, it didn't feel like armor. It felt like balance. I didn't know it then, but that philosophy, cautious, deliberate trust, would change everything. Because soon, I'd meet someone who reminded me too much of myself before the fire, and I'd have to decide whether to stay in my safe, rebuilt world or step back into someone else's flames. The invitation came through an organization I'd almost ignored, Women Who Build. They were hosting a local entrepreneurship summit downtown, and someone had nominated me to speak about resilience in business. I nearly deleted the email. Talking about betrayal wasn't my idea of therapy, but Piper pressed. "You should go," she said. "It's not about reliving it. It's about showing people it's survivable." Evan agreed. "Besides," he added with that calm logic that always softened me, "you can't keep rebuilding in silence. Let them see what strength actually looks like." So I went. The ballroom buzzed with polite ambition, panels about funding, innovation, and balancing it all. Most of the speakers were polished, practiced, the kind of women who could smile while their worlds burned. When it was my turn, I stepped up to the podium and did what I'd promised myself I wouldn't do. I told the truth. I spoke about postpartum paranoia that wasn't paranoia, about watching my best friend strip my name from contracts while I rocked my newborn to sleep, about fighting back with evidence instead of rage. Silence spread across the room like spilled light. No one checked their phones. When I finished, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt raw, like I'd handed strangers the sharpest parts of myself and they were holding them carefully. Afterward, women lined up to speak to me. Most thanked me. A few cried. One waited until the crowd thinned. She was young, early 20s maybe, wearing a borrowed blazer 2 sizes too big. "My co-founder just asked me to take a leave of absence," she said quietly. "Said I've been distracted since my mom's diagnosis, that the company needs focus." Every word was a ghost from my own story. "What does your gut tell you?" I asked. "That something's wrong, that she's setting me up." I handed her my card. On the back, I wrote my private number. "Document everything," I said. "Emails, texts, calls. Don't confront yet. Let the evidence do the talking, and call me if you need help." She gripped the card like oxygen. "Thank you." 2 weeks later, she did call. Her name was Kara, and her voice trembled as she read out financial records she'd accessed. Irregular transfers, signed for convenience. It was like hearing my own past echo back. "Meet me tomorrow," I said. We spent 6 hours in the small conference room at Larkline, tracing the evidence thread by thread. Devin helped her organize the spreadsheets. Camille reviewed her draft complaint pro bono. By evening, Kara had a full case file ready to confront her partner. When she finally exhaled, she said, "I couldn't have done this without you." "You could have," I said. "You just needed someone to remind you you weren't crazy." That night, I lay awake thinking about how familiar her relief felt. The mix of fear and vindication. Maybe this, helping women like Kara, was why I'd survived everything. Not to rebuild a company, but to build a warning system. It started quietly, through word of mouth. Founders introduced other founders. Women emailed from different cities, telling stories that sounded painfully similar. Partners who rewrote contracts while they were sick. Investors who replaced them under the guise of stability. Colleagues who whispered unfit. I began meeting them over coffee, sometimes after hours in the Larkline office, sometimes on Zoom after Lark was asleep. I listened, advised, and connected them to Camille when legal firepower was needed. Camille teased me about it once. "You're building an army," she said. "I'm building a network," I corrected, "of women who refuse to be blindsided again." "Same thing," she said, smiling. We started calling it the Phoenix Circle, half jokingly at first. Then one of the women designed a logo, a subtle golden feather. We put it on a shared drive, no dues, no titles, just a mission. Trust with proof. Protect each other. Months passed. Larkline grew. The Phoenix Circle grew faster. Our Slack channel turned into a lifeline for women on the edge of losing everything. Sometimes I'd close my laptop after a late-night strategy call and just sit in the dark, listening to the rain. For the first time, the echo of betrayal didn't feel like poison. It felt like purpose. Then, one night, my inbox pinged, with a name I hadn't seen in years. From Maris Ellery. Subject, "I'm sorry." I stared at it for a long time before clicking. Her email was long, messy, written like someone who hadn't slept. "Eliza, I've thought about writing this for months. I'm in therapy now, trying to understand why I did what I did. I was jealous of your calm, your family, your ability to make success look effortless while I was drowning in pressure. I told myself you'd outgrown us, that motherhood made you soft. I was wrong. You were stronger than I ever was. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. I hope you're happy. You deserve to be." I read it twice, maybe 3 times. My hands didn't shake. My heart didn't race. There was only quiet recognition that the apology came not for me, but for her. I closed the laptop, walked to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water. Then I came back and hit delete. Some bridges once burned shouldn't be rebuilt. The next morning, I found Lark in her high chair, hands sticky with jam. "What are you building, Bug?" I asked, noticing the cereal boxes she was stacking like towers. "Castles," she said proudly, "so the dragons can't get in." I smiled, brushing a crumb from her hair. "Good plan. Build them strong." Weeks later, at our first Phoenix Circle dinner, I told the women about the email. Not the words, just the feeling. "You didn't respond?" asked Mira, a startup CEO who'd been betrayed by her own sister. "No," I said. "Some apologies are about easing guilt, not making peace." The women nodded. Kara raised her glass. "To boundaries, not walls." We clinked glasses, laughter mixing with exhaustion and relief. Driving home that night, the city lights blurred in my windshield. For the first time since the collapse of Bridgeway, I realized I didn't feel like a survivor anymore. I felt like a builder again. Because fire hadn't destroyed me. It had refined me. And now I was teaching others to rise too. By the time Larkline turned 3, my life had finally found a rhythm. Work in daylight, family at night, quiet in between. Not peace exactly, but structure. The kind of structure that holds after everything else has collapsed. I'd stopped checking my accounts 5 times a day. I no longer flinched when someone mentioned board meeting. But I still noticed every small tell. A partner who hesitated before signing. A client who avoided direct answers. I'd learned to read people the way I used to read code, line by line, looking for hidden bugs. That instinct kept me safe. It also kept me isolated. "You know," Evan said one evening while we were putting Lark to bed, "you're allowed to trust people again." "I do trust people," I said. He raised an eyebrow. "You trust systems, Eliza, not people." I smiled faintly. "That's how the systems stay upright." He sighed. "Boundaries are healthy. Fortresses aren't." I didn't respond, but the words stuck. Boundaries, not walls. Larkline had grown to 40 employees. We were profitable, respected, and, to my surprise, considered a model for ethical tech leadership. North Sound expanded their contract again. A small business journal featured us under the headline, "From Ashes to Algorithm, the woman who rebuilt her company after betrayal." Camille called after reading it. "They made you sound saintly," she said. "I'm definitely not that." "No," she agreed. "You're better. Saints forgive too easily." That spring, we hired a new project manager, Tara Quinn. Sharp, empathetic, almost unsettlingly calm, she reminded me of myself before the storm. Within weeks, she became indispensable, anticipating problems before they surfaced, diffusing tension with a single raised eyebrow. One afternoon, as we reviewed a client dispute, she said, "I read about what happened at your last company." I looked up. "I'm sure you did." "It was brave," she said. "How you handled it." "Necessary," I corrected. She smiled slightly. "That too." The Phoenix Circle was thriving. now a quiet network spanning 6 cities. Kara had rebuilt her startup from scratch. Mira launched a mentorship fund for betrayed founders. Every month we met for dinner, women who'd been burned, now passing around matches like warnings. The rule was simple: no pity, no preaching, just shared knowledge. We didn't fix each other. We equipped each other. One night, Mira raised her glass. "We should stop calling it the Phoenix Circle," she said. "We're not rising from ashes anymore. We're running empires." "Keep the name," I told her. "It reminds us what fire costs." The email came at midnight. Subject line: urgent. Need help. It was from a woman named Adriana, referred by Kara. She wrote in short, panicked bursts. "My business partner's been taking clients behind my back, setting up a competing company while I'm on medical leave. She says she's protecting the brand. I don't know what to do." I didn't hesitate. I replied, "Send me your partnership agreement and every message she's sent you in the last month." Within an hour, my inbox filled with attachments. The language was textbook, the same false, temporary transition phrasing Maris had used years ago. Deja vu, sharp and electric. I texted Camille, "Need a consult. Tomorrow morning. Urgent." Then I poured myself coffee and started drafting Adriana's timeline. The next day, she arrived at my office looking like she hadn't slept in weeks. Early 30s, smart, meticulous, the kind of woman who'd built something from scratch and couldn't quite believe it might be taken away. "I can't prove anything yet," she said, clutching her folder. "You don't have to prove it," I told her. "You just have to prepare." Together, we dissected her documents. Her partner had opened a shell company under a nearly identical name. Same clients, same vendor list, even the same copy on their website. When I showed her the overlap chart Devin built, she covered her mouth. "How could she?" "She could because she thought you wouldn't notice," I said gently. "That's what betrayal relies on. Disbelief." By evening, Camille had drafted a cease and desist and a restraining order request. Adriana left the office with shaking hands but steadier eyes. "Thank you," she said. "I felt so alone." "You're not," I told her. "None of us are." After she left, I sat in the darkened office and stared out at the city skyline. Somewhere out there, another woman was probably being told she was too emotional, too distracted, not leadership material. And somewhere else, another Maris was smiling politely while filing the paperwork to erase her partner's name. The world didn't change overnight, but women like us could make it harder for predators to hide. A few weeks later, Adriana called again. Her partner had backed down after receiving Camille's letter. Investors reinstated her leadership role. "I can't believe it worked," she said. "It worked because you acted before she did," I replied. "You stayed calm. That's what wins." She laughed, shaky but proud. "You sound like you've done this before." "Too many times," I said, but that's why I knew where to start. That night, after Lark fell asleep, I sat beside Evan on the couch. We watched some mindless cooking show, but my thoughts were elsewhere. "I helped someone today," I said. "You help people every day," he replied. "No, I mean, I helped her the way I wish someone had helped me." He turned to me, smiling softly. "Then maybe that's what all of this was for." "Maybe," I said, or maybe I just couldn't stand watching history repeat itself. "Boundaries," he murmured, "not walls." I nodded. "Exactly." Before bed, I opened my laptop and clicked on the Phoenix Circle folder labeled Cases. Kara had updated the spreadsheet. Adriana, resolved. Next to it, a simple note. Confidence restored. I stared at those 2 words for a long time. Confidence restored. Not justice served, not vengeance achieved, just confidence. The quiet kind of victory that didn't make headlines but changed lives. The next morning, sunlight filtered through the blinds. Lark padded into the kitchen in her pajamas, dragging her stuffed rabbit. "Mommy," she said sleepily, "what did you build today?" I smiled, pouring her a glass of juice. "Something important," I said. "Something that helps people keep what's theirs." She nodded like it made perfect sense. "Good. Dragons don't like smart people." I laughed. "No, they really don't." She grinned, climbing onto her chair. "Then we'll be smarter." And in that small, sticky moment, jam on her hands, sunlight in her hair, I realized I'd finally done it. I'd built a life the fire couldn't touch. 5 years. That's how long it had been since I walked back into Bridgeway with federal agents and evidence folders, my stomach still stitched, and my daughter barely sleeping through the night. 5 years since Maris's face drained of color as the world she'd built on lies began to cave in. Now I stood in a sunlit glass office, mine, at Larkline Systems, the skyline reflecting in the window, the air smelling faintly of coffee and cedar polish. The company was bigger than Bridgeway had ever been. 70 employees, 3 cities, and a balance sheet that finally felt unshakable. It should have felt like closure. It didn't. Evan called from home. "You sure you want to do this anniversary party? You hate attention." "It's not about me," I said, adjusting my blazer in the reflection. "It's about the people who built this after everything." "Uh-huh," his tone softened. "Don't forget to eat something before you make a speech." "I'll try." He chuckled. "You never do." By noon, the office buzzed with music and chatter. Employees milled around tables stacked with cupcakes and champagne. The Phoenix Circle members had flown in. Kara from San Diego, Mira from Austin, Adriana from Portland. They were laughing in the corner, arms looped like sisters who'd bled the same battle. Camille arrived last, wearing her trademark black and an amused smile. "I can't believe I'm saying this, but you made it," she said, handing me a small box. Inside was a delicate bracelet, a silver feather charm glinting in the light. "For the circle," she said, "and for the woman who somehow made being betrayed look like a career path." I laughed. "Not sure I should thank you for that." "You should," she said, "because it's true." During the speeches, I watched faces more than I listened. Devin, the once cautious CFO who'd found his courage. Piper, juggling logistics with quiet brilliance. Tara, calm as always, catching details others missed. When my turn came, I stood in front of them and took a long breath. 5 years ago, I began. I thought my story ended with betrayal, but it didn't. It just changed shape. It became a story about what we build after people break us, about choosing to build again anyway. I looked toward the Phoenix Circle table. Some of you know what that feels like. You lose everything, not because you weren't strong enough, but because you trusted the wrong person at the wrong time. I built this company to prove something to myself. That trust doesn't have to die with betrayal. It just has to evolve. Applause rose like a wave. I smiled, but my chest felt tight with something heavier than pride, gratitude mixed with grief. Because part of me still remembered the woman I'd been before the fire, and she didn't exist anymore. Later, as the crowd thinned, I stepped onto the balcony with Nate Rios, the journalist who'd once published the story that destroyed Maris's empire and saved mine. He was nursing a beer, eyes on the city below. "You realize you started a movement, right?" he said. "Every founder who gets blindsided now cites your case. It's like folklore." "Folklore?" I laughed. "Makes me sound like a cautionary ghost." "Maybe a patron saint of receipts," he said. "Your story stuck because everyone knows a Maris. Everyone's trusted one." "Everyone's been one," I said quietly. Nate tilted his head. "You still think about her?" "Sometimes." I leaned on the railing. Not out of hate, just curiosity. What happens to people who can't admit they were wrong? Do they ever stop spinning their version of events? He shrugged. "Does it matter?" "No," I said, surprising myself. "It really doesn't." When the guests left, I walked through the empty office, the hum of the city filling the silence. I paused by the framed photo of our first garage whiteboard. Piper's handwriting still crooked across the top. Trust with proof. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. "Hello?" A woman's voice, hesitant. "Hi, I got your number from the Phoenix Circle site. My name's Adriana." I smiled. "Another Adriana?" "No, sorry. Different Adriana. My business partner asked me to sign documents transferring my voting rights while I'm on medical leave. She said it's temporary, for company continuity." Her voice cracked. I don't know what to do. The phrasing hit me like déjà vu. Company continuity. The same euphemism Maris had used the night before she tried to erase me. I grabbed my notepad. "All right," I said gently. "Start from the beginning." She did, haltingly at first, then faster as the details spilled out. Each word was a mirror reflecting the same betrayal in a new face. When she finished, I said, "Here's what you're going to do. First, don't sign anything. Second, forward me every email, every text, every meeting note. Third, I'm connecting you with my attorney. She's the best there is." "Camille Hart?" she whispered. "You really mean that Camille?" I smiled. "The one and only." By the end of the call, her voice had steadied. "Thank you," she said softly. "I thought I was crazy." "You're not crazy," I said. "You're seeing clearly. That's why they're afraid." After we hung up, I sat alone in the darkening office, the city lights flickering to life beyond the glass. The hum of servers in the next room sounded almost like breathing. I thought about how far we'd come, how far I'd come. Once, I'd been the woman pleading for someone to believe her. Now, I was the one on the other end of the line, guiding another through the storm. Evan texted, Home yet? Lark's waiting to tell you about her art project. Something with glitter. Prepare yourself. I smiled, typing back, on my way. Save me pasta. Then I shut down my computer and took one last look at the skyline. Somewhere out there, Maris was living a quieter life. Maybe even happy, maybe not. I didn't need to know. The part of me that once needed revenge had been replaced by purpose. The world would always have its Maurices, but now it also had us, women who knew how to see them coming. I turned off the lights and headed home, where Lark was waiting, with paint-stained fingers and a grin big enough to swallow the day. The next morning, I woke to sunlight cutting through the curtains and the sound of Lark humming to herself in the kitchen. She was 8 now, old enough to pour cereal, old enough to insist on independence, but still young enough to leave a trail of milk across the counter. "Mom, you're late," she announced when I walked in. "You have your big hospital meeting today." I smiled. "Who told you that?" "Dad, he said it's important." She leaned on the table like a tiny executive. "Are you nervous?" "Not really," I said, pouring coffee. "More like ready." She nodded solemnly, then grinned. "You always say that before you do something awesome." The expansion deal with North Sound Health had been months in the making, an enterprise-wide partnership that would triple our annual revenue and make Larkline Systems one of the most successful women-led firms in the state. But that morning, as I rode the elevator to the top floor of their downtown headquarters, the numbers didn't matter as much as the faces of the people waiting outside the conference room, Piper with her notebook, Devin double-checking the budget projections, Tara tapping her pen rhythmically against the folder. They were my constants, my rebuilders. The meeting lasted 2 hours. When the signatures were finally on paper, Corinne, North Sound's CIO, smiled across the table. "You've built something remarkable, Eliza. Not just a company, a culture." I exhaled, the kind of breath that comes after years of holding one in. "Thank you," I said quietly. "We've all built it." She nodded. "That's exactly why it works." Back at the office, the news spread fast. Piper popped open a bottle of champagne, and someone played music through a Bluetooth speaker that couldn't handle bass. There were cheers, confetti made from shredded test prints, and more joy than noise. When it died down, I slipped away to my office, the same space where I'd once drafted lawsuits, now filled with photos of smiling employees, my daughter's crayon art, and a framed quote from Camille. "Documentation is faith in yourself." The inbox pinged. From Adriana, Seattle Chapter, Phoenix Circle. Subject: "It's done. We got the injunction." Attached was a photo. Her team gathered around a laptop, faces lit by victory and exhaustion. I saved it to a folder labeled, "Why I Do This." Inside were dozens of similar pictures. Women in offices, cafes, home workspaces, each of them standing where I once had, at the intersection of ruin and rebirth. That folder had become my real legacy. That evening, the Phoenix Circle met online, 10 little glowing rectangles across 3 time zones. Camille joined late, as always, pretending she wasn't sentimental about these calls. Kara started the meeting, raising a glass of wine. "To new wins," she said. "And to old wounds," Mira added, "because they remind us how strong the scar tissue is." Everyone laughed softly, the kind of laughter that knows what it costs to get there. "My daughter asked me last week why my company logo has a feather," Adriana said. "I told her it's because some fires are meant to make you fly." "That's the quote," Tara said, smiling. "It put that on the website." "Too poetic," I said. "No one trusts poetry in tech." Camille rolled her eyes. "They do when it's profitable." We laughed again, and for a moment the screen felt like a cathedral, built out of shared survival and stubborn hope. Before logging off, Kara asked, "Eliza, are you ever going to take a break? A real one? You've been saving the world one founder at a time." I hesitated. "I'm not saving the world. I'm just making it harder for the wrong people to win." Camille smiled. "Same thing, honey." After the call, I stayed behind in the empty office, the hum of the servers filling the quiet. My phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Hi, my name's June. I was given your number by Adriana. My business partner's trying to amend our charter while I'm out on maternity leave. I don't know what to do." I didn't even sigh. Just opened my notepad. "Start from the beginning," I typed back. 30 minutes later, she'd sent me everything. Emails, statements, contracts, different names, same story. And as I read through them, it struck me again. Betrayal might change its costume, but it never changed its script. When the call ended, June sounded steadier, more certain. I thought I was alone, she said softly. You never are, I told her. That's the whole point. Outside, the sky had turned to velvet. The city glowed beneath it, alive and pulsing. I gathered my things, grabbed my coat, and looked once more at the framed whiteboard photo. Trust with proof. The words had followed me across companies, across years, across fires. I realized then that I no longer saw them as protection. They were a promise. To myself, to the women I'd helped, to the daughter I was raising. When I got home, the house was filled with laughter. Evan had burned dinner again. Lark was sitting on the kitchen counter dipping crackers into sauce, and the air smelled like cinnamon and chaos. She spotted me and waved her spoon like a wand. Mom, I made a castle out of spaghetti. I laughed. Of course you did. Evan kissed my cheek. How was the meeting? Better than good, I said. We signed the expansion. He smiled. You realize you've built more than a company, right? I looked at him, at the kitchen, at our daughter, at this life that had survived the worst parts of people. Yeah, I said. I do. After dinner, I tucked Lark into bed. She handed me her stuffed rabbit and asked, Mom, were you scared when the lady tried to take your company? Yes, I said honestly, very. But you won. Not right away, I said. Sometimes it takes a long time to win the right way. She nodded, satisfied. Good. Then I'll win slow too. I kissed her forehead, turned off the light, and stood in the doorway listening to her hum, the same tune she used to make up when she was a baby. Later, in the quiet of the living room, I poured a glass of wine and sat by the window. The night air smelled of rain and streetlights. Somewhere out there, Maris was still part of the world. Maybe she'd changed. Maybe not. It didn't matter. Her story had ended the day I stopped letting her write mine. I thought the fire destroyed me. It hadn't. It had tempered me. And what survived, what always survives, are the women who choose to rebuild. I glanced at my laptop one last time and opened a blank document. At the top, I typed, Transparency protects, proof liberates. Then, below it, the words I always end with, my promise to anyone who's ever found strength in these stories. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear your story too.